All right, can you state the proposition?
We assert that the political machine that originated in the early 20th century created a type of system that hurt America. A good example of this is the political bosses took advantage of the newly found immigrants. Another example is the political bosses were illegally storing things and working underground to get their supporters, which was called bootlegging. The political machine was how the bosses gave resources to the immigrants, which was not enough to thrive, in exchange for votes. The bosses were called vultures because they were basically stealing the immigrants' money and giving them half or less of what it was worth. The bosses were all very greedy, and greed equals corruption, and sometimes too much power equals corruption. They tricked the immigrants into friendship only for reputation, popularity, votes, and money. It created a corrupt type of system that hurt America from the inside out. The bosses had way too much power over all the immigrants because they did not know this because they were new to America. The bosses had way too much money and power over the immigrants of them not knowing what was going on. All the immigrants who were coming over to America did not realize how corrupt the bosses were, but they needed a job to provide for themselves and for their family. The bosses saw this and took advantage of it. And after the bosses got the immigrants' votes, they decided just to get rid of them because they didn't need them anymore. The result of this was immigrants dying on the street, alone and broken. This is why we assert that the political machine created a type of system that hurt America and corrupted its citizens. The vultures made life harder for the immigrants, which was not good for them. All these facts are why we believe the bosses only used the immigrants for their own personal gain and didn't care about the immigrants at all, and why I believe that the political machine created a type of system that hurt America.
Excellent. Cross-examination from the negative, please.
Okay, so
Can you state?
one thing is, don't you agree that bosses also did good things?
Mhm.
Okay, so that doesn't mean they're fully corrupt.
Yes.
Corrupt means you're all bad.
That's why I said some citizens.
And did it hurt the immigrants that they were getting votes?
Most immigrants times they did get just thrown out, and that's why they a lot of times were just dying and didn't have any help from the bosses.
So you don't think that the immigrants could just go get another job elsewhere?
They could, but most likely they couldn't find one because the bosses were just leaving them a door right open and would let them join in. But after they didn't need them anymore, they would just cast them out.
Okay, and then also, do you agree that someone has to have power?
Someone will have to have power, yes. But if someone does have power, then they could have power over other people, which is very bad for the person who's under the power.
So you're saying that if no one had power, the world would be perfect.
That's not what I'm saying. Because if there was no one in power, that would mean there would be disorganization.
So then there should be power.
Yeah. There's some power, but if there's too much power, then the world would go into chaos and everyone would be fighting.
And then also, do you agree that the bosses, that money that they might have gotten from the immigrants, don't you agree that they also gave it back through libraries, sponsoring libraries?
No.
And so you say bosses didn't sponsor libraries. Okay. Well, and then immigrants, don't you agree that the immigrants were having better lives in America than they were back in their old country?
Most likely, yes.
So
But at the same time, they could
is it
also
really
be having
hurting
it worse.
them?
Yes, because they're dying, and when they might not be dying at their home country.
So you're saying at their home country when they're being tortured and tormented and persecuted, that they're having a whole lot better life here in America where they're actually getting a job and having pay?
No.
So
I'm
then they
saying
are having a better life here in America.
Some might have a better life, but not everyone will have a better life. Some who are just migrating
And
over.
then
could
what's
have
your
a-
proof that the bosses were just slinging immigrants off?
What do you mean by that?
What's your proof? Like where on
That
earth?
they're casting them out?
Yeah, casting them out.
Because
Why would they accept a new person?
they would accept a new person just because after the re-election happened, they would need new people. Because after they cast the other ones out, they wouldn't trust them anymore. So they'd probably just run against them or join someone else.
So you're saying that it was better for them to get rid of workers that were helping them get money, just so they could find a different rank worker.
After they don't need them, yes.
Okay. So you're saying that in, say, a sewing factory, and the sewer, he doesn't need a sewer anymore to make suits.
20 seconds.
So yeah, more people equals more votes, and more votes. And the sewers, they didn't need the sewers. They could hire other people to do those things. So if say
What's the point in getting rid of a sewer is, like, what's the point in getting rid of a sewer?
Because you could get one for, you could pay one for cheaper if they took it.
Then why would they, why, if they're building more factories, they need more workers, so the person could just go to that factory, right?
Yeah, but they can just keep making them having lower wages and working longer hours for basically nothing.
And that's time. Rebuttal, please, for the affirmative. Yes, rebuttal for the affirmative.
So, you said that the political bosses, did a few good things, but that was only to buy more political votes from the immigrants. The only reason that the bosses needed to give back to the community is because at first they gave low wages, which hurt the community. Bosses, as Mason said, bosses saw the confusion of immigrants and saw their need for money, so they took advantage and gave the immigrants very low wages and less money than what they worked for. Historians describe political bosses as the vultures of the Gilded Age because they scavenged for ways to get more votes and to become more powerful. You said that some person has to have power, but it's like how the government has distributed power and it's balanced. Not one person can have all the power.
Is that your rebuttal? Okay. So we can have the introduction for the negative. Introduction for the negative side. All right, Carter, go when you're ready.
Our team asserts that the urban bosses originating in the early 20th century created a type of system that helped America. If it was not for the urban bosses, our economy would have never proceeded with its venture to the best economy in the world. With America growing, the need for more factories and workers was strong. If America didn't have enough workers, then there would be no factories. With no factories, America would be helpless. In America, there is a government, but that government cannot control everything in the cities outside of their government. In the highly populated cities, urban bosses were usually the hierarchy. Every few days, more and more immigrants would come, starving and homeless. Urban bosses offered low-skilled jobs to immigrants so they could provide for their families and not die as soon as they arrived. If it weren't for the urban bosses, all those immigrants would die of starvation. The only reason the immigrants survived was because of those urban bosses. Some say that urban bosses were corrupt. Were they really, though? Unlike greedy kings and dictators and so forth, urban bosses actually gave money to people, helped immigrants, and helped America. No one can say they are corrupt if we are sinners and don't know the person's motive. A person is as corrupt as the person right next to them. Until heaven, corrupt on earth is a matter of perspective. Urban bosses were sometimes called robber barons. They would give what they stole to the poor from the rich, so they were not robber barons if they gave and did not keep it all for themselves, almost like Robin Hood. Urban bosses were essential to America, and if we did not have them, then we would all have never reached where we are.
Okay. Cross-examination for the negative. Carson?
Okay, so some urban bosses were good and some urban bosses were bad. But when they used their money to build libraries and stuff, could the immigrants read all the books that they set out for them?
Yes, and when you travel to America, you have citizenship, so you can travel through the city because it's your right. And whenever you go there, you can read, and they can learn, and they can go in those jobs, and they can keep going up further and further to make more money.
Okay, well, they have more factories, and the urban bosses keep buying more machines. With more machines, would that mean they would need less workers?
With more machines, there would be more workers to operate those machines.
What if they're self-operating machines?
They did not have that technology. So back in the day, they would have to have someone operating it and working it until the end of the day, where they could just go home.
Okay, so would it be hard for the workers, like the immigrants, just being put into a factory where they have to work all day long? Will they want something different besides that?
They might want something different, but at first they would probably have to be taught before they would actually do it. Because if they weren't taught and they did not know how, then they could not be able to do the job. But it was low skill, as I stated earlier, so they could do it pretty easily without having to get that much instruction.
Okay. Also, if the immigrants had a big family and they have low pay, how do they keep providing for their families if they keep getting low pay?
Well, their
Politician
families
bosses.
would probably most have died on the boat over because it was really rough. So it would probably be a smaller family when they got
But what
over.
if they did have a full
If
family?
they had a bigger family, then if they had a bigger family, then it'd just be more workers. They could get more money, and then they would that many people would be
20
providing
seconds.
for that family, and then they would be able to make more money and provide.
Okay, and if the political bosses gave the immigrants some loan money, wouldn't the political bosses be like, hey, I gave you money, now you have to be nice to me and like do what I want you to do, and
If
I'll take away your money? Can they do that?
no, but they will have to eventually pay them back.
Okay. Well done, well done. We have an introduction for the negative. What's that? No, the conclusion.
rebuttal.
The rebuttal, please. Rebuttal. I'm sorry. Sorry, I was getting sucked in.
It's
So-
okay.
So you said that someone said that no one person can have all the power. Do you believe that? Well, if you believe that, God has all the power, and the bosses can't give everyone the best life ever, but they're giving them like what they need. You don't need like all this candy stuff. You just need what you need. And aren't people doing the same thing to get votes today? And we're still thriving today. And we're all corrupt because of sin. But we can still thrive like we are today. So they helped the immigrants and America. America would not be the same without them. And there has to be power, and someone has to have the power. And how can someone have power but not over people? Like Mason had said, it can't be over people. But how can you have power without it being over people? And also, they said a lot that they did it for the votes. A, how do you know people's motives if you weren't in their shoes? And B, even if they did do it for the votes, even if some did for the votes, they still provided immigrants better lives, which caused it to help America. And without a hierarchy of, like, there can't be all distributed power, like, not everyone can be the same, because without a hierarchy with, like, bosses and then people lower than them, it'd be anarchy. And that's why we believe the political machine originating in the early 20th century created a type of system that helped America.
Well done. All right, for our conclusion, we'll have the negative go first and finish with the affirmative. All right, Autumn.
In conclusion, we assert that urban bosses were good for the economy and their employees. We assert this because the bosses helped keep a good hierarchy in a peaceful country, and they contributed to the economy, which is still thriving today. Also, they provided jobs and homes to the poor immigrants who had next to nothing. Fourthly, they gave back to the community, which is something that vultures, which is what they were often referred to as, didn't do. Besides, how can we know their motive? How do we know that they were just out to get the immigrants? Also, just because one boss was bad, how can we deem all the bosses evil? Secondly, it wasn't technically corrupt because there were no rules. They had to make these up along the way. Thirdly, aren't we all corrupt because of sin, but we can still thrive and live in harmony? Fourthly, how can we apply our modern, luxurious standard to those of the poor immigrants of the 1900s? In conclusion, we assert that the urban bosses were good for the economy and their employees.
Well done. And for the affirmative, Marty.
We assert that the political machine originating in the early 1900s created a type of system that hurt America. The political machine was how bosses gave resources to the immigrants, but they gave low wages and not enough to fully thrive. As Grace stated, they actually did help people. You need certain things, but the things they need aren't always as much as the people gave them. They gave them low wages, and they have to provide for their entire family. They also did it in exchange for votes. As Autumn said, or it might have been Grace, they were in, you don't know how it is if you're not in their shoes, and maybe they, like, you don't know. They could have been completely, absolutely against and corrupt and trying to get more power, because more power is what people need when they are trying to go against all the other factories, and they're wanting political votes, so they clearly are trying to, they're trading in exchange for political votes, which means they want political power. And they didn't give immigrants all that they needed. They gave them low wages, and they were trying to basically steal from them. They were called vultures because they scavenged and tried to go underground and bootlegging and do things that illegally. They and as you were saying, they gave important things to the people who helped them and gave things that they needed. They gave them to a few. It doesn't mean that they helped all of America. And the question is about the system it created. The system was votes in exchange for resources. They gave resources to the people who gave them votes, and they only helped those few people. And the votes just gave them more power, and they got more factories, and they could mass produce things and make them cheaper. And that was how they got more factories, they got more money, and they got more votes the more immigrants they took in. When Wallace was asking Mason about how they the bosses got the immigrants' votes and got rid of them because that was it. Wallace was asking why they would get rid of them. They got more votes the more people they used. They got one person, they gave them what they needed, they got their votes, they're done. We get another person, we get their vote, and they're done. And it's like a lineup. You get all the votes you need, and then you get rid of them, and then you get more power and more money, and you're good. And so that is why we assert that the political machine created a type of system that hurt America.
All right.
And yeah.
Excellent. Well done. Clap. I think applause. Well done.